Hey everybody, Realm Builder Guy here, and welcome back to the channel. In this episode, I want to talk about my favorite class in all of Dungeons and Dragons, namely the Ranger. That was the very first class I was ever drawn to back 35 years ago at this point. I was playing AD&D 2nd edition, and of course, I went with a Ranger. It is just, you could blame Aragorn. You could then blame Tanis half-elven for the fact that it had to be a half-elf ranger. It was right away, love at first sight. And I have always, when I play, I don't always play a ranger. I've played other classes as well, but if I'm told it's open, do what you want, oftentimes I'll default to the ranger, and I've played it most often in all the different editions now, and I've come to the conclusion that, well, there's one edition of the Ranger that is simply the best, and yeah, it goes back pretty darn far. In fact, all the way to the beginning of Dungeons and Dragons, or almost all the way to the beginning of Dungeons and Dragons. But before I get into that, if you enjoy my content, don't forget to hit like and subscribe for more videos. There are also links down in the description on how you can support the channel, Patreon, buy me a coffee, check out my stuff on DriveThruRPG, etc. Yeah, so I hope you enjoy it, and now let's take a closer look at the Ranger. So, original Dungeons & Dragons, of course, published in 1974, and even with the Greyhawk supplement coming out shortly thereafter, there wasn't a Ranger. The first appearance of the Ranger was in this edition of Strategic Review from the summer of 1974, single copy, 50 cents. Yeah, you can't get this for 50 cents anymore. And here we have the Ranger. This is an exciting new Dungeons & Dragons class by Joe Fisher. So Rangers are a subclass of fighting men, similar in many ways to the brand new subclass Paladins. So again, this is post Greyhawk supplement publication when the Paladin was introduced. So you've got a few different minimum scores you need to reach. It looks like intelligence and wisdom scores of 12 each, constitution of at least 15. You've got down here the experience points breakdown, 2,500 to get to the second level, which is the Strider level. No spell ability until later down here, 8th level. They get cleric first level spells and then magic user first level spells. Hit dice, interesting. So they are a D8 hit dice, you see here. Allows fighters 8-sided dice, but they start with 2 at first level. Really, really interesting. And then they've got a few other little additions here that Joe Fisher added to it. But more, I wanted to just highlight the fact that the first iteration of the Ranger showed up for original Dungeons & Dragons a year after the publication of the game. So the Ranger's pretty much been around, let's call it, not from day one, but from day 365 or something like that. But essentially from the very first publishing of Dungeons & Dragons, the Ranger was in there, but not officially because it wasn't in the official rules. It was published in Strategic Review. Now, it wouldn't be until the publication of this Advanced Dungeons & Dragons Player's Handbook until the Ranger became an official class of Dungeons & Dragons. And yeah, spoiler alert, this is the best version of the Ranger, in my opinion, and I'm going to make my case going through. I'm not going to go through edition by edition, but I'm going to talk about a little bit some of the changes while I review the AD&D first edition version of the Ranger. It's been in every edition of Dungeons and Dragons since. Now, I don't have any experience with 4th edition, and I'm going to skim over that, as everyone really should. But I will say that coming down to 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons, you know, I read through it again. I ran 5e for quite a while, but it's been a while now since I've run it. And I read through 1st edition, 2nd edition, 3.5, and 5th edition Ranger again. And yeah, the 5th edition Ranger is by far the least interesting, the most nerfed, neutered, boring version of the Ranger there is. And I'll kind of go through it as we go through this bad boy right here. So now we are in the AD&D First Edition Player's Handbook, which you can find on the DMs Guild. I'll put a link down in the description. Everybody should be playing AD&D. And I'm just going to go through the Ranger description here, and we're going to go step by step and kind of explain some of the differences between first edition and the subsequent editions. There's some things you'll say the subsequent editions did better. Okay, maybe. There are a few little additions right there, or additions, not editions, and some where I just say they dropped the ball on this one. So, the Ranger. Rangers are a subclass of fighter who are adept at woodcraft, tracking, scouting, and infiltration and spying. All Rangers must be of good alignment, although they can be lawful, chaotic, or neutral otherwise. So here's already the first change to subsequent editions, though not in second edition. In second edition, you still had to be good in alignment, but again, just like here, lawful, chaotic, or neutral. However, once 3.5 came out, or third edition, it really opened it up to any alignment, though it said they tend to be good. And then in fifth edition, they kind of ignore any form of alignment whatsoever in that regard. And it's not really spoken about as something that you need to do. It's kind of like how the Paladin was lawful good as a requirement, and then that just went away. Now, you can play an anti-Paladin, of course, which would be lawful evil, but I still maintain a Paladin is lawful, and lawful good should be the way it should be played. To open it up to someone being chaotic neutral, that's not a Paladin. But with a Ranger, the same way. I believe it is. Ranger is good. There is no evil Ranger in that sense because of the essence of what the Ranger should be. Everyone can interpret it as is, but I'm going off AD&D here, and this is the way a Ranger should be played. A Ranger must have strength of not less than 13, intelligence of not less than 13, wisdom of not less than 14, and a 14 or greater constitution. If the Ranger has ability scores of greater than 15 in strength, intelligence, and wisdom, he or she grants the benefit of adding 10% to experience points awarded by the referee. So again, this is going into AD&D. AD&D second edition had the same, not the exact same requirements, but the same that you needed to qualify with minimum scores and ability to qualify for a class. I know this is a favorite for a lot of people to throw out right away, and you can just be whatever you want. I completely, vehemently, and utterly disagree with this form of gaming, which I know this will upset some people, but I don't really care that much. And the reason why, again, I'm coming from it from a simulationist standpoint. Rangers, paladins, bards, stuff like that are very, very rare. The regular fighter isn't as rare. So pretty much you get a strength of 9, you're going to be a fighter. But if you want to be a ranger, a very specialized kind of lone figure out in the wilds, there aren't 100,000 rangers in the world of, say, Greyhawk. There are very, very few, and when encountered, it's something unique and special. Same with the paladin or the druid. To then have it just be as ubiquitous as anything else, I think hurts the class in that sense. Now, you can make the argument that a player character is unique. They should fall outside of that norm requirement. Fine, if that's what you want to do. I disagree. I think meeting minimum scores are one for an in-game simulation makes sense, and two, there are a lot of different things that the ranger has to be able to perform, and so having these minimum requirements helps to make sure you're playing a competent ranger. I also want to get really just quickly, it's not mentioned here, but that there are race restrictions as well. In first edition, you could be human, and half-elves could be rangers. Half-elves, depending on their strength, could either be 6th, 7th, or 8th level maximum. In second edition, humans, half-elves, and elves could be rangers. And then as of third edition, there were no barriers to entry, so to speak. Again, I know a lot of people kind of get rid of this, even playing AD&D. Again, something I disagree with. I do not think a dwarf ranger makes sense, because again, it leans into outside nature. Gnomes and halflings we can quibble about, half orcs we can quibble about, but overall, I think it just makes the most sense with elves, half elves, and humans, and especially humans. Castles and Crusades does this really great, but I'm not. That's not what this is about. But just say they have a great way of opening it up to anybody, but humans are the best rangers. I'll just leave it at that. So, unlike other fighter types, rangers have 8-sided hit dice, D8. So, paladins and fighters, sorry, have a D10, but the ranger has a D8. It should also be noted that rangers get 11 hit dice. Oh, again, but at first level, they get 2 rather than but 1. Should also be noted that rangers get 11 hit dice rather than the 9 of the fighter types. In addition to considerable prowess as fighters, rangers have druidic and magical spell capabilities when they attain high level. Thus, they are very formidable opponents, for they have other abilities and benefits as well. So we'll get into those other benefits and abilities here in a second. But specifically, what I want to talk about are now the hit dice. If we look at here, so the paladin has 10, and the ranger, if we go here, has 2 8-sided hit dice. The fighter, on the other hand, has 10-sided hit dice as well. You'll also notice the fighter needs 2001 XP to advance to level 2. The paladin needs 2,750, and the ranger needs 2,250. So there are a lot of things now I'm going to go over here in particular. So first of all, hit dice. So in second edition, the hit dice for all warriors, so you had warrior, and underneath warrior you had fighter, paladin, ranger, was a D10, a single D10. In third edition, you actually had the ranger go back to a D8 hit dice, and then in 5th edition, it's a D10. So it's interesting you went from a D8 to a D10 to a D8 to a D10. But of course, in 1st edition, they start with 2 hit dice. So you could end up with, well, 16 hit points at level 1 versus and this is just the roll, this is without constitution bonuses, and the fighter or the paladin with a max of 10. So again, this makes a ranger really, really cool, but there are restrictions, and there are ways that the fighter is made better or more interesting and unique in 1st edition versus paladins and rangers for other areas specific to fighting. And if you're interested, I can do a fighter deep dive video at some point as well, specifically here also for 1st edition AD&D. So the other thing it mentioned is the accumulation. So up to 10th level, the ranger accrues hit dice. So they'll have 11 total by 10th level, whereas the fighter and the paladin, it stops when they hit 9 hit dice at 9th level. So there's a little bit of a difference there, so they go a little bit further. The other thing to note here are the XP. So as I noted, the fighter needs 2001, the paladin 2,751, and the ranger 2,251. In 2nd edition, the fighter didn't change, but paladin got brought down to 2,251, just like the ranger. Not a huge fan of that, but I can see they're like, oh, it's a subclass of the main, so they're all going to be the same. But fine. But then, of course, 3rd edition onward, you had unified XP progression charts, and to get 2nd level, you need 1,000 XP. And in 5th edition, you need 300. I mean, it's a joke. Let's be honest. But I'm not going to get into that. But here, it's interesting how it's broken down here. Fighter easiest or quickest to advance, followed by ranger, and then paladin, which I kind of like. Now, the other thing they mentioned right here in the text was the addition to considerable prowess as fighters, rangers have druidic and magical spell capabilities when they attain high level. And again, now you're going to see why they need a good wisdom and intelligence. So if you scroll down here, you can see starting in 8th level, they gain druidic spells up to level 3 in druid spells, and then magic user spells starting in 9th level. So this is, of course, the magic spell abilities up to 17th level. The ranger must check as to which spells he or she can learn, just as if he or she were a magic user. So this is where intelligence is important, because you got to roll the percentile dice to see if you know spells. First and second level magic user spells. So it's a little bit nerfed, but versus, say, being a magic user or being a druid, but you have a pretty good selection of spells you could choose from. Again, a druid, this comes to you. Whereas magic user, you need a spell book. Now you could house rule that a little bit, but you need a spell book of some type. Now, the way casting changed over time in AD&D second edition, it's also as of 8th level, but it's not magic user, it is just divine casting, so it's priest spells of plant and nature sphere, so more or less druid. Again, druid in second edition was a specialty priest. It was technically a separate class, but not like it is in AD&D first edition. Then in third edition, it specified that they can cast divine spells, theoretically starting at 4th level if their wisdom is high enough, though it really kicks in even if they're just base average wisdom, starting at 6th level. And then in 5th edition, the Rangers have a specific spell list just for Rangers, and they can start casting already at 2nd level. And their spell list is more or less the Druid spell list with a couple specific Ranger spells like Hunter's Mark, and 1 or 2 wizard spells thrown in there, like, say, Alarm. But I find the way the spells are broken down, that you have druidic and magic user spells available to the Rangers in AD&D first edition, I find this way more compelling, and that it's later on. I like that it's later on. I'm okay with, for third edition, moved it up to 6th level. Again, you could do 4th if your wisdom was high enough and you needed to qualify. So you needed at least a wisdom of 11 to cast first level spells. There is a qualifier there, whereas with 5th edition, there's no real qualifier because they just think you got to throw in magic casting for every class in some version, which I totally disagree with. And I'm probably going to do some kind of article or video talking about magic. Anyway, but that's not what this is about. I need to stop getting distracted. We're going to talk here more about the Ranger. So this is one change there as well. Now, if we go back here again and take a closer look at the other abilities that the Ranger has, we're going to start right up top here, and this is basically your favored enemy. Now, each iteration has something like this. 5th edition has by far the most boring version of this. So, when fighting humanoid type creatures of the giant class listed hereafter, Rangers add 1 hit point for each level of experience they have attained to the points of damage scored when they hit in melee combat. So basically a +2 damage first level, you get a +1 damage bonus on top of everything else when you hit giant class creatures. This includes bugbears, ettins, giants, gnolls, goblins, hobgoblins, kobolds, ogres, ogre magi, orcs, and trolls. So here's an example. A 5th level ranger hits a bugbear in melee combat, and the damage done to the opponent will be according to the ranger's weapon type, modified by strength, and +5 for his or her experience level because the opponent is a bugbear, a giant class humanoid. What I like about this is you have everything from kobolds in here and goblins, which are pretty low level, which you'll deal with a lot in the first couple of levels, up to trolls, which become pretty serious opponents, but also Ettins and giants. And it doesn't say frost giant, fire giant, hill giant. It says all giants, and of course ogres and ogre magi. So it basically scales with you as you get more powerful, and it makes it useful right away. Now, this also exists in every edition hereafter. In second edition, you pick a specific species. So, and with that species, you gain +4, if I remember correctly, it's a +4 to hit. No damage bonus, +4 to hit. And then you get a -4 on reaction rolls with them. Okay, it's fine, though not great. You can argue what's more important, to be able to do more damage or to increase your likelihood of hitting. I prefer this one because your damage scales with you as a character. In third edition, aside from a lot of other things you get to do, like tracking bonuses and so on, again, you get a tracking bonus as well. In second edition, in third edition, you also get a damage bonus that then also grows as you grow. You get to, I believe you get a +2 to damage and a +2 to tracking, because you got skills and feats then introduced in third edition. And you are picking a category. So it's no longer that you're picking, just giant class. You could do Fae or aberrations or dragons or something like that. And then you can add, as you advance in levels, another favorite enemy. In 5th edition, you gain a favorite enemy that you pick either a specific category again, or a general category like, undead. Or you can pick 2 humanoids, so Gnoll and Orc. Great. You get a bonus to tracking them, so your survival rolls, and you learn their language. That's it. Awesome. Cool. Cool for a essentially fighter subclass that you get nothing that helps you in combat against your favorite enemy, but you get to know stuff about them. I would just rule that you get to know stuff here anyway, but moving on. That is how the favorite enemy changes. I think the way they have it in third edition is, of the latter editions, the most interesting one. But I still will say that this version here is my favorite because it focuses on a large category of humanoids that scales with you. So trolls and giants later on are a big deal. Kobolds and goblins at lower levels are a big deal. So you always have something that works for you. You can argue third edition's interesting just because now you can jump into other monster categories, but it's still limited. This gives you a little bit bigger options. I would quibble with whether I'd want dragons in there or not. These are also the most likely encountered by rangers in the wild, so it makes sense that this is a favorite enemy. This is basically the setting in the world kind of dictating your choice versus you as a player building the optimal option. So I like it I like the world helping build the character versus it just being a player optimizing their build. So next we've got Ranger Surprise, opponents 50% of the time. So that's a 1 through a 3 on a d6. Regular surprise is a 1 or a 2. And they themselves are surprised only on a 1 in a 6 chance. So this is really nice. Surprise later gets a little bit nerfed in the sense that nobody seems to really care about it. In second edition, it's still there. After that, it kind of gets ignored a lot. Tracking. Now, tracking is ubiquitous in all of these editions. There's some form of tracking. So tracking is possible both outdoors and underground. In dungeon settings, underground, the ranger must have observed the creature to be tracked within 3 turns. Creature's action, chance to track. You can see here the percentage, so it's a percentile roll. Outdoors, there is a base 90% chance of a ranger being able to follow a creature, modified by these things like each hour of precipitation for every 24 hours of time elapsed. creature for each creature above 1 if the party is in the party being tracked. So if there are a lot, you have a bonus to tracking them. Everything else, it starts to go down a little bit. And I really like this. In second edition, it's the non-weapon proficiency, so it's +/-1 type of thing. I'm not going to go into it in third edition or fifth edition. Fifth edition, it's basically your wisdom survival roll, focus predominantly on your favorite enemy. And then, of course, in third edition, you got so many feats and skills, you'd get bogged down. I like this. It's a straightforward, simple little thing. Second edition does add hide in shadows and move silently in the outdoors. If you're doing it underground, that chance gets cut in half. When I run AD&D, I tend to run first edition, second edition, kind of a mashup in certain degrees, and I'll just throw in those move silently and hide in shadows in here for the ranger, because I do kind of like that, to have that in addition to this. At 8th level, rangers, okay, we already talked about 8th and 9th level of the game, the ability to cast spells. However, rangers cannot read druid or magic user spells from magic scrolls in any event. So they're not scroll-based casters. They can't do that. 10th level, ranger lord. Rangers are able to employ all non-written magic items, which pertain to clairaudience, clairvoyance, ESP, and telepathy. Then also at 10th level, each ranger attracts a body of 2 to 24, so 2d12 followers. Note that these henchmen, once lost, can never be replaced. Although mercenaries can be hired, of course, these followers are determined by the DM, who then informs the ranger. In second edition, there's actually a table that you can roll on to determine who shows up. Okay, one quick little addition. While I was saying it just a second ago, it popped into my head. There is a follower for upper level character role determination in the Dungeon Master's Guide for first edition. It's not in the player's handbook, which it is in second edition, because again, they did separate a lot of things because they thought, this isn't something players need to know. This is something determined by the DM. So any of you that were typing when I said, oh, there are no tables in first edition, now you can adjust that back. So here, when you roll 2d12 to find the number of followers or creatures attracted to service. When the number is generated, adjust the following percentile dice as follows. So you get 2d12, and you have percentages here. If any addition or subtraction falls within a category no longer permissible, or if a subtraction results in a score under 1, roll again. Okay, so you're basically rolling here when the number of rolls the ranger player character is entitled to is discovered, and the adjustment necessary noted. Determine the follower creatures using the tables below. All scores over 70 are special. The ranger is able to attract one follower creature group only from each category as noted. Add all creatures of any sort to final totals, demi-humans included. So if we go to the next page here, we can see what we have here are the results. So dice score again. So when roll 2d10 to find the number of followers for, followers, when the number is generated, adjust the following percentile dice rolls as follows. So 2d12, you rolled a 6, you add 5% to the first roll. Okay. And then add 10% to the first roll. 3, add 15% to each roll, and then it gets to reduced as you have a higher roll here, percentage-wise, because then it goes more into this category here. So you are determining the number you get, and then so say you attracted 4, so 4 followers show up. You add 10% to the roll. So you then rolled, say, a 65. You add your 10%. That's a 75. So you see the animals table 3. Go down to animals table 3. One roll only on this table. So then you roll. This is the first roll only. and you rolled, I don't know, a 57, a blink dog. You get 2 blink dogs. Now you have 2 still left. You go back up here, you roll again. And again, remember, it's to the first roll. So after that, it's just a straight up percentile roll. And you get human table. Human table 1. You roll again. You get, say, a druid. Range level, you determine that with 1d4 plus 1. And then you can kind of bounce around like that and create your followers that way. So there is this system here in AD&D second edition. It's a single table, so it's a little bit quicker and smoother, but this does give you a greater variety. And I kind of want to play that ranger with a blink dog. Following restrictions and strictures apply to rangers. Any chance to non-good alignment immediately strips the ranger of all benefits, and the character becomes a fighter with 8-sided hit dice ever after and can never regain ranger status. Rangers may not hire men-at-arms, servants, aides, or henchmen until they attain 8th level or higher because they're kind of loners. No more than 3 rangers may ever operate together at any time because, again, they are kind of loners. Rangers may own only those goods and treasure which they can carry on their person and or place upon their mount. All excess must be donated to a worthy communal or institutional cause, but never to another player character. Like, check out the Paladin. Although Rangers do not attract a body of mercenaries to serve them, when and if Rangers construct strongholds, they conform to the fighter class in other respects. So, yeah, you can, of course, save up money. I say this, it's kind of like the Paladin. If you want to build a stronghold for your Ranger, you can put that to the side, but it's not like you can live lavishly. And then down here, you've got extra attacks. Of course, this is something that carries over into future editions, extra attacks, but it's not specific always to fighters or the fighter subclass. The Ranger is less powerful than the Fighter or the Paladin in this regard. So they, for levels 1 through 7, they get 1 attack per round. Levels 8 through 14 versus 7 through 12 for Fighter or Paladin, 3 every 2 rounds. So the way that plays out is first round, you attack once. Second round, you attack twice. And then as a 15th level for the Ranger, Fighter, Paladin is 13th level. You get 2 attacks per round. Here's a special note just for fighters that I'm not going to talk about right now. So there you have it, folks. That is the Ranger in AD&D First Edition. My favorite version of the Ranger by far. Again, you can add a couple of things from Second Edition. Though there's really not a ton that I would add to it at this point. Maybe that move silently and hide in shadows that you get in second edition. But as is, to me, this is the most interesting version of the Ranger. Third edition, again, third edition D&D is its own beast. That is so different from anything else. It's kind of like fourth edition. There are certain things they carried over from AD&D into it, but there's just so much, so many rules in there and feats and a bloated skill table that it's its own unique little thing. So you could say, oh, that's the most interesting form of the Ranger because of everything. But I have my issues with that. I think 5th edition is by far the most boring version of the Ranger. And so I'm going to say that AD&D First Edition, go figure, Gary Gygax got it right. Got to thank Joe Fisher, of course, in Strategic Review for laying the foundation for the Ranger class in 1975, and then Gary Gygax kind of taking it from there. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Which is your favorite version of the Ranger? Have you even played a Ranger? What do you think of the Ranger? What do you think of AD&D? And don't forget to hit like and subscribe. So until next time, I'm Realm Builder Guy, and I will talk to you soon.